Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these two guys right here. These are two different variants of the Seiko watch's Alpinist model, but this is the latest re-release under the Prospex line. So it is the Alpinist, but it's the new Alpinist, and so I'm looking forward to taking a look at these guys. But actually, before I go any further, I want to thank my buddies over at Lewis Jewelers in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They were my AD for watches back when I lived in Michigan, and they're still my AD now because they ship stuff, right? And they probably could be yours. They do Seiko. They do Breitling, Omega. They do a bunch of other brands. Just call up my buddy DK over at Lewis Jewelers. Tell him Nick Shabazz sent you. He'll hook you up with some special pricing. But nonetheless, they've been helpful for me, and they ship these guys my way to check out. Nonetheless, I've told them that, they'll loan me the watches, sure, but I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They still send it along, but there's your full disclosure. Next thing, let's do a little bit of size measurement with these guys right here. These guys are, and actually I'll just do it with the one on the bracelet just because it's a little bit more wieldy, so to speak. If we look at this guy, we see that including the crown, our width over here is in inches. No, we're in watches now. We are at about 43 wide, including the crown. The lug-to-lug distance here is, let's see here, 44.9, which is actually remarkably straightforward. If we take the crown out, we're looking at about 36 inches here. The overall thickness on this guy, it's not super thick. We're looking at around 13.7, depending on whether or not you're on the Cyclops on there. And that's a beautiful thing. And I don't think there are any... Oh, and then the width of the lugs here is... come here. Lug width here is coming in at 20 millimeters, so do keep that in mind. So there's your size thing. Next thing, let's do some size comparisons real quick. Here it is against, and again, I'll just use the silver one here, the same basic size. Here they are against the Omega Seamaster Diver 300, one of my very favorite dive watches. Here it is against my other Seiko in my collection at the moment. This is a Seiko Samurai, and what we can see here is that the Alpinist is markedly smaller than the Samurai on pretty much every dimension, and that can be a very nice thing for some folks. So there's that. Next thing, just so you know, this review is based on relatively little time with the watches because these guys both came to me factory fresh, and indeed I want to be able to, sell them afterwards. So I figured I'd keep them that way. So do keep that in mind. But I have reviewed and owned actually the prior generation of Alpinist before. You can watch my review of that. And so in a lot of ways, I'll be talking about the differences between these guys and the other one. And finally, I've got two models here on the table, but there are actually four models available. So this guy right here on the bracelet is the SPB117. This retails at $750. Don't pay retail, but nonetheless, $750. You can get better from a good AD. Then you've got the white on black strap, and that's this guy here, which is the SPB119 at $725. Then you got two other variants that I don't have on the table here. One has a green dial, like the classical Alpinist, with a gold set of insignias on there. Indices, and hands. That's $725. And there's also one with a cream-colored dial, which honestly doesn't look that different from white in the pictures. I was thinking this was a cream-colored dial anyways, but hey, whatever. With gold indices, and that is $725. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of these two little guys right here. So on the good side, one of the things I appreciate about this guy is the size. Like I said, this has a relatively small lug-to-lug distance, which makes it wear very well for a lot of folks, even with relatively smaller wrists. Here, I'll throw this guy on my wrist, and you'll get a sense that even with my 6.75-inch wrists, this is not particularly overwhelming. This kind of size range, I think, is actually very, very appealing to a lot of folks now, and it's in a more classical size range relative to the dinner plate sorts of watches that we're seeing on a regular basis, so that's good. Next thing, this is using a bracelet. This is the first Alpinist to ever ship on a bracelet, and I gotta say, the bracelet itself is a big step up for Seiko, at least. It has a micro adjustment hole right here, just one level of it, but, hey, it's a start. It's one more than they've had in a while, and so that's good. For Seiko, honestly, this is a win. This is a step forward, and the clasp itself is honestly, it's more reminiscent of the Grand Seiko clasps that they've done before, rather than their classical diver's clasp with that terrible quick extension. Their bracelets are generally bad, but this one's pretty decent. I'm a big fan of this bracelet. I'm a fan of this bracelet relative to what they've done before. So there's that. Next thing, the strap on this guy. If you buy the one on the strap, what we see here is that this isn't just like a conventional tang strap. This has a deployant buckle. What that means is that you adjust this to your wrist wrist exactly once, and then when you put it on your wrist, you just snap it in place and then feed this through. And that's actually a nice thing. I appreciate a good deployant buckle, and the fact that you're getting that on this price, that's pretty solid. I appreciate that. And just frankly, it makes the watch wear a little better. It makes for less wear and tear on the straps. It's a nice thing. So I'm a big fan of a deployant buckle, and I think it classes the whole thing up because this is a reasonably classy little watch here. Next thing, movement in this guy. As you can see on the inside here is a Seiko 6R15 movement. See if I can show you that nicely. This is actually here, I'll just go ahead and peel off this sticker right quick. That way you can get a better sense of it. Yeah, there's a nice looking movement in there. I mean, is it the most figured movement ever? Absolutely not, but it does look pretty decent. And it is an upgraded movement. The 6R35, sorry, is an upgrade from the 6R15. Sorry, I got confused for a second there. I thought this was the 6R30. Yeah, anyways, I digress. The movement on this guy is the 6R35, as it says right there. And this is an upgrade from the original 6R15, which was in the Alpinist, which is how I got myself tongue-tied. The biggest area where they've upgraded this guy is that it is now has a 70-hour power reserve, which is a very, very nice power reserve. That is an entire take-it-off-for-the-weekend sort of power reserve, and it does absolutely great. I'm a big fan of that, and I appreciate the upgrade there. It is also an automatic movement, as you can see from the weight in there that moves around, letting you charge this guy just by the motion of your wrist. It has its hand winding as well. It's got a date with a quick sec function on there, meaning if I pull this guy out to the second position here, I can adjust the date here, one forward, and I can keep going all the way back around to today's proper date, so I don't get confused later on, and it is indeed the 25th. It is the 25th. All right, there we go. And the date is properly set. It is a hacking movement, meaning when I pull the crown all the way out, the second hand stops, as any good modern movement should be. And it is a brand new movement for 2019. Given it's 2020, so that's a weird sentence to say, but it is. It's a relatively new movement in Seiko's lineup, and it is an upgrade, strictly speaking, over the 6R15 that was in the Alpinist before then. Next thing, this guy still does include the compass bezel on here. This is something that honestly looks cool more than anything. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but it is not a magnetic compass. Instead, it relies on you looking at the difference between 12 o'clock and the hour hand. It's a thing, but you know what? It is a thing that adds a little bit of visual intrigue, and if you'd like, you can actually use the red of the compass bezel to time an event out, which is honestly where I've used it more, is just like, okay, my pizza's coming when the minute hand hits the red line here. It's so it can work a little bit like a dive bezel in that way, but it's a little bit easier to move around, so, keep that in mind. Next thing, this guy has 200 meters worth of water resistance. This is a watch that is actually fine for some exploration, for some alpinism, if you will. You jump into a mountain stream wearing this guy, it's going to be just fine, because 200 meters means that you're basically good to go on water. You don't have to worry too much about it. I appreciate that very, very much. Next thing, the dial on these guys. This guy has a matte dial. What I mean by that is it wasn't created by a guy named Matt, but instead, if I put some light on the subject here, from a flashlight off the screen, yeah, you can see it's got a nice little bit of a matte finish to it, as opposed to the sunburst to some of the prior ones. But the white one here, I'll put a little light on the subject as well. This similarly has a little bit more gloss to it, but still, they're very, very nice dials, and I appreciate that very much. And they've got some nice details to it too. You've got the red text for the 20 bar, as well as for the compass indicators. That's kind of nice. And on the white version, you end up with the compass indicators in orange, but the 20 bar in a regular black font there. You've got a nice mix of case finishes. We can see here you've got a nice high polish around the outside here, and you've got yourself a little bit of brushing on the edges of the case, as well as polished sides, which is nice. You have yourself a very nice handset. This is sort of it's not a Mercedes handset. It's not quite a cathedral handset, but it's someplace in the middle there. So it's a nice thing, and it's, as far as I can tell, it's a relative, I don't know if it's super unique, because there are a lot of things that do similar like that, but at the same time, it's distinguished. It's very Alpinist, right? And it's kind of what they've done for a long time. And, I think it looks good. It's got some nice details to it, and I appreciate that very much. Then finally, on the good side, this has some notable improvements relative to the last generation of Alpinist. Couple of them. This has a sapphire crystal, so did the old one, but this has anti-reflection. That is important. I mentioned last time that the previous one was a very, very reflection-prone watch, that it really only looked good in some pictures with very specific lighting. The rest of the time, it was just reflecting the world, right? And I'm not a big fan of that. Instead, what we've got here is something with a little bit less reflectivity to it. Yeah, you can reflect things, but that's the case with anything. So I appreciate that little bit of step up there. They've also gone to the display case back here, allowing us to see the movement a little bit better, which, well, to see the movement at all, which I appreciate. That increased power reserve. Frankly, the overall watch itself feels a little bit cleaner. The indices are a little bit more cleanly punched. They're a little bit flatter, etc. So you get something that looks a little bit more like a polish. The hands are a little better polished. Honestly, this just feels like it was done better. This watch feels like it was done by, you know, if not a better factory, certainly a better approach. Like they spent a little bit more time and effort and care into making this guy look great than they did in the last generation of Alpinist. And one would hope so with a price hike, but still, this looks pretty damn good. I'm a big, big fan of that, and it is something I appreciate. So to me, all of that is the good. It's that they've made some actual improvements relative to the last model. The matte dial looks pretty good. The cream dial does too, for that matter. The 200-meter water resistance is great. It's got some nice details. It does include the compass bezel. It's got that upgraded movement, the 6R35. The strap has a deployant buckle, which I appreciate. The bracelet is pretty good by Seiko standards, although still some room for improvement, and it is a nice size. To me, on the great side, though, is that they've continued this line. The Alpinist is a line that is very, very famous, I think, in the Seiko world. A lot of Seiko fans know the Alpinist and love the Alpinist. And it is sort of its own little thing, right? I don't know that anybody kind of anticipated it being what it is, but it has become a thing. And the fact is they've continued it forward here. They've made something that is very much the Alpinist. When they talked about killing that model, everybody went crazy. They, you know, suddenly jumped up in price, etc., but they were smart and they brought it back. But they've also done it in a way that makes it a little bit better. This is not just the Alpinist reissued, but this is the Alpinist reimagined, made a little bit nicer. And it can make this guy a little bit more serious and sporty when you put it on the black brace with the black base and the bracelet, or you could even dress it up a little bit. This is not necessarily a watch that would look bad in a, you know, with a suit or something. It can dress up some. And so I appreciate that. And by the way, I just have the crown out here because I was winding it earlier. It's got a screw-down crown, just so you notice. But nonetheless, they have made this guy, I think, a more compelling watch by doing this, but they've retained the thing that makes the Alpinist stylistically so interesting. And especially if you go with the green dial model, what you are getting is the old Seiko Alpinist, but just strictly better. And that, to me, feels like a win, and that is what is great. They're taking a thing that was already great, and they made it better. On the bad side, like I said, the movement finishing on this guy is not super impressive. You know, it's okay. It's got some finishing to it. But compared to, well, here, I'll be unfair and I'll compare it to a $4,000 wristwatch. Actually, more than that. It's a little dirty in the back there, but still, the movement finishing is not quite up to Omega standards, but it's also way, way cheaper. $5,000 watch. Nonetheless, that's a thing. I'm also not a huge fan of the X Prospex branding right there. It just doesn't seem to fit the overall aesthetic otherwise. The rest of it's very kind of old school. That's a very modern logo. Not a big fan of that. Next thing, it's 2020, Seiko. Just so you guys know, it is time for you to include a toolless quick adjust on your bracelet, that is. What they have now is a tool full quick adjust, where if you've got a watch spring bar tool, you can pop that in there and give yourself a little bit of extra. But at the moment, it's hard to get exactly dialed in where you want to be, because they are also not including any half links. They don't have a half-length link, and that would be a great thing, but unfortunately it's not a thing. At least let us buy them. But, you know, honestly, while we're at it, it's probably a good idea to, you know, allow your bracelet to accept other clasps more gracefully, and just put a little more adjustability in there. You know, add one more removable link on this side. You know, right now, for my relatively small wrist adjusted, this guy is relatively, I'm right at the edge of what I can take out of this. And that's not a great thing. Like I said, half links would be better. An extra space, a quick adjust, they can do a little bit better than this. And so Seiko is still a little behind in the bracelet game. Although, by the way, note that the bracelet is polished on the sides, which is another nice little detail here. But nonetheless, they could definitely do a little bit more work. Next thing, the compass bezel. Compass bezel is a gimmick 100% of the time. The thing is, yes, it can work. If you are looking at if you have the instructions memorized and you point this guy at the sun, then the hour hand will point to it's a whole affair. fair. The thing is, in order to do that, you need to know whether you are currently in daylight savings time. You need to know the equation of time to adjust it to get proper heading. The sun needs to be visible, so it doesn't work well when the sun is behind a cloud and you can't see exactly where it's at. I mean, I got to be honest with you. The compass here is completely, it's not a thing. Don't think about this as like, oh, I'm lost. Look, chances are your phone's got a better compass than this guy has on board. That is a gimmick through and through. It's an attractive gimmick, though, I got to say, and it adds a little bit of visual interest, and it adds a little bit to the explorer's heritage. And look, it's not costing you anything. I mean, aside from the opportunity cost not buying another watch, but don't look at this as like, oh, I'll never be without a compass. Like, yeah, technically speaking, true. But yeah. Next thing, this is not the most accurate watch ever. I mean, it's $750, and at that price point, we should be doing pretty well. But this guy here, I threw these guys on the time grapher, and we're running the worst position plus 10, the other position is -5. So I think we're going to probably be averaging out around a plus or minus a couple of seconds a day. Again, I didn't put it on the wrist for long periods of time to check. Actually, this guy shipped a little bit magnetized. This guy's a little bit more accurate, actually, coming in around, I think the worst position was +7, and the best was, and the other side was -2. So, depending on how you wear it, they're going to be okay. And especially if you're letting it run down between wears, you're going to be absolutely fine. But nonetheless, I'd like to see the accuracy done a little bit better, and I'd rather not have had to demagnetize the guy as I'm doing that, because before I demagnetized, it was running like +25, which was not amazing. So that's a thing. Next thing, this is a little tiny detail, but they do not have anything that differentiates the 12 o'clock and lume. This is a lumed watch, and in fact, I probably could have put the lume under good here. But if we take a look here, this does have, it's lumed. It has a lumed index at every single thing, as a lumed hour hand, minute hand, and second hand. Unfortunately, though, you cannot tell at a glance which is up. If you are in the middle of the night and you're disoriented, it's going to be hard to tell what exactly is the 12 o'clock, because they didn't do like 2 dots up the top here. So in the future, I'd like to see a little bit of distinguishing the 12 o'clock relative to the other indices. It's a little detail, but it's one they can fix pretty easily. Then finally, on the bad side, they did increase the price. When they took this guy away and brought it back as a Prospex, and by the way, the white one has lume, and it is just as good. I'll show you that with a flashlight here. It's pretty attractive, actually. So, nonetheless, they increased the price on these guys. At some level, the very last thing anybody needs right now is a price hike, but at another level, they did a lot of improvement to it. And so I wish the price is lower, but in a lot of ways, I feel like they earned a lot of this price hike. Had they just brought it back with the same set of features, same movement, same everything, with a price hike, I'd be really all up on them. But nonetheless, $750 retail's a lot of money, but they did some improvements. And again, don't pay retail. Talk to a good AD, talk to my good AD. They'll probably help you out. So to me, all that's the bad is that they increased the price. There's no differentiation of the lume at 12 o'clock. It's not the most accurate thing ever, but again, it's $750, and it's within range, I would say. The compass bezel, it's a gimmick, 100%. They could use some more adjustability and a toolless quick adjust in the bracelet. The Prospex branding doesn't do it for me, and the movement finishing's not awesome. To me, the only ugly thing about this watch is the Cyclops. This is entirely, the Cyclops, of course, is this little piece of extra crystal that sits on top of the crystal of the watch and makes the date much bigger. If we look at this from the side, we can see how big the date actually is. And then when we roll this up, the date gets way bigger. Now, mind you, as you begin the aging process, it may be harder for you to read a tiny little date. That's going to be a thing that maybe I'll appreciate more in 20 years. But for the moment, in 10 years, let's be real here. But nonetheless, for me at least, I don't particularly love the look because it distorts the hands, etc. Can make things a little bit harder to read around this, but at least it's a relatively small Cyclops. So, I personally don't particularly care for the Cyclops look, but at the end of the day, it's not the end of any worlds. So it's ugly, but that's more personal than anything. Final conclusions. Honestly, they took a real classic of a watch here, the Alpinist, and they just kind of improved it. They put it on a bracelet for the first time, and the bracelet's actually pretty decent. Relative to some of the stuff Seiko's usually running, that's good. It's got an upgraded movement. It's got some nice details. It's got some good robustness to it. The watch overall has got some very nice robustness features to it. This is a watch, and with the 200-meter water resist and such, this is a watch you could conceivably do some exploring in. 100%. And they've made some good functional upgrades while maintaining the styling that we all kind of know and enjoy from the Alpinist. Yeah, of course, the movement isn't amazingly finished. It's not the most amazingly accurate thing ever. The compass is a little bit of a gimmick. There are a couple other gripes, and they did raise the price here. But on the whole, This is a really nice piece. They have improved something very, very excellent, and they've widened the range some a little bit. It used to be that you could get green, and that was the only color. Then they did a limited edition with, I think, Hodinkey that was blue, and that's the one I had, and I love the color, but, you know, it still had all the other downsides, and I had to pay a bunch more to get a bracelet for it. So I think I ended up paying about the price of this guy for the old one plus a bracelet aftermarket. And that bracelet, you know, nonetheless. So, you know, they've done something that's, I think, pretty excellent. Now that you've got more options, too, it's even better. And honestly, I like this more than I expected to. Because at some level, when I first, you know, heard about this, the only thing I really saw was the price hike. And to be fair, nobody needs to be price hiking right now. In this age, no, you should be thinking of ways to get your price down and up the value rather than the other way around. But at the same time, this feels like it's earned the price hike more than a lot of price hikes have been earned in the last little while in the watch world. It's not perfection, and value is not on the table for high horology, let's be real here. You know, $750 for a watch is always going to be less of a value than spending $12 and getting, you know, the Casio or something like that. But at the same time, given what they've done here, it's pretty damn good. And it feels like a better value for the money than the last one did. Honestly, I would prefer to pay the increased price for this model with the improvements that they've made relative to the older price. I'm not necessarily, well, I mean, certainly I'd rather pay the older price for this guy, but I feel like they did a good job in earning that price thing. Then when you add in the other green, the cream dials, etc., I think this is going to open this model up to a lot more people. I think a lot of people saw the Alpinist as being sort of a curiosity, but if you didn't love the green, you didn't love the watch. But now you got a bunch of options here. You've got a bunch of options. Actually, they're all reasonably attractive. This black one really jumped off the table at me, and this is actually where we come to the very awkward part of the review. Hey, DK over at Lewis Jewelers. I'm really sorry, but unfortunately, I think this model here got lost in the mail. I know it was a loan, and I feel really bad, but it's just, I think it's lost. The USPS, they say there's nothing we can do about it, of course. I mean, this is always the risk when you ship watches. I mean, you know the business. This is the day. Anyways, in all seriousness, actually, DK broke me down again. He's done this to me a couple of times, most notably, of course, with this Omega here. Like, hey, Dick, we're going to ship you guys, we want to ship you one of these guys as a loan. And he knows me well enough to know that it was going to be sticking around anyways. And so, given the fact that this guy on the bracelet is pretty much everything I liked about the original, but fixing a lot of the issues that I had in my original review, yeah, this one's mine now. This is a watch that I now own. Hopefully it will keep some of the Rolex Explorer desires at bay for a little while. And hopefully it'll just, you know, it's a joy. I really like the old one, and this fixes a lot of those issues, so it's a win. But yeah, these are a very, very excellent set of watches. The watch is damn near a gem in its own right, and given a little bit more adjustment on that bracelet, oh man, this could be 100% there. And so ultimately, this is a very, very easy watch to recommend, and I suspect that the Alpinist could very easily climb its way into your watch box coming soon. So anyways, there you go. Hope this is interesting. Thank you very much, DK, for sending one along, and damn you, DK, for sending this one along. And have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.